Well, hey, Lighthouse. Well, we did it. We got all the way from Romans to Jude. We covered all the Pauline epistles, the church epistles, the general epistles, the John's epistles, and Peter's epistles, and all the way through that little book of Jude. Started that journey in the summer. Man, I feel pretty good about that. What a year of devotions for us to work through all of the epistles in the New Testament. You know, there are some letters to churches, epistles to churches there at the beginning of Revelation, and I really thought maybe we'll just keep going and finish the New Testament and work through the book of Revelation. And we might someday, depends on how long, how we're making these videos, how long I'm making these videos, but in my opinion, Revelation, the book of Revelation is just best studied together. Not just my talking head telling you what I think, but rather in study together. And that would be my hope in studying the book of Revelation. We might make some Revelation videos at some point, but Revelations is even hard from the pulpit. It can be done. I've seen it done well. Hopefully someday I'll do it well. And yet I'm not sure this video format devotionally in 10-minute chunks is the best way to do that. So I might come back to it at some point, but I thought, well, where would we go from here? On Sunday mornings, we're just wrapping up 1 Samuel, kind of in the middle of the life of David, and we'll finish out talking about David's life on Sunday morning. So some good, rich Old Testament history there on Sunday mornings. And so I want to stick to the New Testament. And I thought, why don't we be refreshed in the parables of Jesus? These funky little stories that Jesus told, many of them that begin with the kingdom of God is like. The story that we're going to read today does not begin like that. And yet really all of the parables, you look at them as a unit, as a collection, and you can really see the difference between the kingdom of God and the kingdom of man, between the kingdom of light and the kingdom of darkness, and really how to live as citizens, not merely of earth, but as citizens of heaven. After all, Jesus Christ, us as the temple, this is where the heavens and earth connect in the kingdom of God. And so let's talk about the parables. Let's start in Matthew 7. You'll remember that Matthew 7 is the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And so as Jesus gives this parable, man, we cannot divorce it from all of the words that he's just said. In fact, as Matthew records it, it starts by saying in verse 24, this is the parable of the foolish builder and the wise builder. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. Man, it's one of the funnest stories to teach to children, but it is foundational in our faith and difficult to miss the meaning. It's not Jesus teaching that we need to build our lives on him, although that would be a fine thing to teach, a fine thing to say. But rather, Jesus has just taught through the Sermon on the Mount. And he says, everyone who hears these words of mine. So he's talking to a group of people, all of whom who have just heard these words. And you would think that, man, everybody who was there, who heard Jesus give the Sermon on the Mount, surely they just went out and lived a life of blessing. It started with the Beatitudes. This is how you're blessed. This is how you're blessed. This is how you're blessed. And they just went out and lived that life. And yet Jesus, at the end of this, sees two groups of people right before him. Some people who heard these words and then went and lived them out. And some people who heard these words and didn't. And this is one of the saddest, most tragic things about having friends in church with you or growing up with Christian friends is really knowing that you can be in church your whole life. You can hear the words of Jesus and it not make a difference in your life because while you heard them, you didn't apply them. This is the point of the parable. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on a rock. Everyone who hears these words of mine and does them. Man, I preached through actually earlier, just about this time last year, we were getting started preaching through the Sermon on the Mount. Profound differences between Jesus' version of religion and the Pharisees' version of religion. Profound differences between Jesus' idea of morality and the world's idea of morality. Maybe you could sum up the Sermon on the Mount in a phrase. You might say, while the world says that it is wrong to behave in a certain way, Jesus would say it's not only the behavior, but the attitudes that cause those behaviors that keep us from a full, good life with God. You've heard it said, this stuff, but I'm here to tell you it's this stuff. It's how you handle every aspect of your life. And you can see that it would have been pretty easy for people to walk away and go, wow, that was a great word. What a sermon. Just great. I love the way he said other people should care about how they, handle their relationships and marriage. And I love the way he talked about, it's not only about not murdering people, but about, some people should really stop being judgmental, and walk away from there thinking it was all about everybody else. Jesus says, look, if you want a life that's going to matter, if you want a strong life, you're going to have to hear the words of Jesus. And then you're going to have to do the words of Jesus. Man, for this morning's devotions, could we simply evaluate our own life and say, yeah, I've heard the words of Jesus, clearly. But am I doing the words of Jesus? What is my attitude towards my neighbor? What is my attitude towards my enemy? What is my attitude towards my stuff? What is my attitude towards my provision and worry? What is my attitude towards the sin of other people? Am I in the spec pulling out business, or am I in the making sure there's not a log in my own eye business? Jesus goes on and says, and the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house. I just love this. We so easily feel persecuted just when we're having a bad time, just when health issues pop up, when money issues pop up, when difficulties in relationships pop up, when just difficulty of life pops up. We so easily go, God, where are you? Why have you left me? And Jesus is saying, look, for the person who's going to live a strong life, it's not going to be about avoiding storms. He said, this is what the strong person, the wise person is like, is they heard my words, they live according to them, they do my words, and then when the rain falls and the floods came and the winds blew and beat on that house, that is not an option. We're going to have floods come. The wind's coming and it's going to beat on the house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. What a beautiful parable. It's supposed to offend us. We're supposed to walk away and go, are you saying that if I'm going to not be destroyed by the storms of life, I have to do what Jesus says? I can't live according to my own wisdom? I'm pretty wise on my own. No, rather, Jesus goes on and says, everyone who hears these words of mine, again, the exact same people. There's people in this crowd that have heard the words and are going to live by them. There's people in this crowd who have heard the same words and are going to ignore them. They're not going to live by them. And does not do them, verse 26 continues, will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat against that house and it fell. And great was the fall of it. I've heard this parable taught many times like, well, that means you got to dig deep in the word. Get down to bedrock and not just build your house on the surface, right? But so we have to have depth of our understanding of Jesus. And that'll preach. I don't have a problem with that. But that's not the point Jesus is making. The point Jesus is making is, hey, the words that you've heard, are you living them out? Are you doing the Sermon on the Mount, not just hearing the Sermon on the Mount? Man, we don't have time to only worry about the specks in everybody else's eyes. We have to look at ourselves and say, man, the way the Sermon on the Mount outlines my relationships, outlines provision, outlines worry, outlines stress, outlines how to deal with enemies, outlines where I should be getting my sense of well-being from. Do I live like that? Or do I know that? I've heard the words, but I live under my own understanding, my own steam. Let's enjoy some parables together over the next few weeks And let's be those who not only understand the kingdom of God, but live fully by the principles of the kingdom of God. All right, be loved, Lighthouse.